This video is about feeding yourself here in Hawaii. Yeah, that's it's that time, right? Yeah, in history where, wow, food prices through the roof. I feel so lucky that I have an arrangement with my neighbors for eggs, for instance. You know, we do barter there because eggs have been one of the things that have just gone crazy. Chickens went on strike. You know, and well, of course, we get our fish from the local fishermen, and that hasn't moved much. They aren't asking much more for a tuna than they used to. So, anyway, not too much anyway. So we're doing all right, you know, in that regard. I'm not getting hit too bad, but we tend to grow a lot of our own food. And I have people come to me all the time, and they ask me questions about what they call food foresting, permaculture, you know, living off the land here in Hawaii, being able to be, kind of food self-sufficient. Of course, as you all know, I'm also very hot on combining that with energy self-sufficiency, with economic self-sufficiency, and so on. I'm all for total self-sufficiency. I don't like to have to rely on systems any more than I need to. But when it comes to feeding oneself here in Hawaii, if you're coming here, say from the mainland, and well, maybe you lived in Wisconsin, right? I know that place pretty well. And you had fabulous tomato crops there, and you used to have to put up dozens and dozens of jars of tomatoes and tomato juice and spaghetti sauce and all that every year, right? Fill the pantry. And maybe, well, like me, I had potatoes, and Rusk County potatoes grew so good on our sandy loam. Oh, so good. And I used to grow potatoes for most of the extended family. Yeah, they'd put in their orders, how many bags you want, and I used to grow potatoes for everybody. Man, I can't grow a potato here for my life. And it's a rare tomato that doesn't succumb to disease in this environment. And so 2 of the great big crops that I used to do a lot of, the tomatoes are feasible here. Yeah, the potatoes, buy them from Idaho. It's not even worth it. It isn't. No. Anyway, that's my opinion of it. Somebody else may figure out some way to do this, but I can't visualize it without constant regimes of fungicides on the potatoes. So, things you may know and you may be very good at, and you were, so you're thinking in your mind that I'm moving to Hawaii and I'm going to grow potatoes and tomatoes, for instance. Well, good luck. You'll starve to death. You will. No, this is the tropics here, and we have a lot of crops that are perfectly adapted to growing conditions in Hawaii. There are things that just grow like weeds here, but it's not everything. And a lot of it is very different from what people on the mainland in a temperate climate are used to eating. And so if you're going to start doing a, food forest, permaculture thing, and you're self-sufficient, well, where you start from may not be where you finish. I certainly wasn't for me. I started off with everything I knew from the mainland, and then gradually kept subtracting it, and then adding on the other end to what works here. I never grew fruiting hibiscus in the mainland. Yet, Roselle is a very good crop here. I did raise yacon in the mainland, but wow, does it raise here? It's even better here. It grows better here than in the mainland. And so on. So you'll find that there are a whole bunch of things that seem to grow really good and things that don't grow well. I hear people say frequently, "Oh, is there a good book? Do you have a book you can recommend on gardening in Hawaii?" And the answer is clearly no. The reason why is because every 100 foot you go up and down the mountains here, growing conditions change due to elevation and temperature. Every mile you go from the east to the west, the climate dries out. Okay, and so the western side of the island in places only gets 6 inches of rain a year. The eastern side in some places gets 300 inches a year. A whole lot of the island is hard rock lava, either or pahoehoe, and so what you grow on lava is not going to be the same as what grows where you have soil. Now we have ash soil here, but we also have cinder soil too. And they're different. Different plants react differently on them and so on. So a generalized book on gardening for Hawaii, I wouldn't want to try to write it. I'll tell you that. Yeah, when I'm talking, most of the time I'm talking about right here. I'm at 1,600 foot in the town of Mountain View, or just out of the town of Mountain View, facing the ocean, about 120 to 150 inches of rain a year. Temperature usually never goes above 85, hardly ever drops below 50. Okay, and so that's the kind of conditions right in this spot. Well, it's different a mile up the road. It's different 2 miles down the hill. Yeah. So there is no book that will cover things like if you're in the state of Illinois, for instance, and writing a gardening book. Well, as a cotton belt sort of Kentucky-like climate at the very bottom end of that state. But for the most part, that's corn and soybeans all the way to the Wisconsin border. There's very little elevation change in the state and so on. And you don't have a whole lot of climatic change from one end to the other. It's just a little milder in the south and a little colder in the north. And that's about it. It's a little windier in Chicago and so on because of the Great Lakes. But there aren't a lot of variations. I could write a book about gardening in the state of Illinois and probably cover most of it, and it would pretty much all be the same from Cairo to Springfield to Rockford. Yeah, it'd all be about the same, not that much different. Get a longer season down south. So as I'm illustrating, you may find that you're going to have to do your own trials to find out what is growing well in the locations where you're at. Now, I will go ahead, though, and begin to cover a few things I know tend to grow quite well on this island. And in general, if you're in damper areas, taro, yeah, absolutely. Taro, it's a perfectly adapted crop here, almost a weed. It requires some maintenance. You have to dig it, process it, replant it, okay, to keep it going well. But taro, sweet potatoes, and they're good in the wetter areas, but they're also good in the drier areas too. That one sweeps across most of the island where there's enough rain to grow a crop. Or enough soil to plant a potato in too. So your limits are some places too dry, some places too hard. Okay, but if you have soil and you have reasonable moisture, say 60 inches a year or so, here it's enough. You can grow crops of sweet potatoes. Now, sweet potatoes are the type of crop that you can actually go out there and you can find some potatoes all year long. All right, now I highly recommend you actually run the crop in and take the crop out. Run it in, take it out. Run it in, take it out. The reason I recommend that is so you don't build up pests. Yes, if you keep it in place, which it will stay, you will end up with huge buildups. Taro, same thing. Recommend the crop be reprocessed, to replanted to get it to stay vigorous and healthy. But you can get those out of your garden almost any time. I find as an annual crops planted from seed, cabbage and broccoli and kale, yeah, absolutely. Very, very good crops at this elevation. I also do extremely well with lettuce here. I watch out for slugs, so you got to make precautions for the rat lungworm with the lettuce, but it's a great climate for lettuce, man. Yeah, so... it's another good one. Of course, these are things you have to be taking from seed. With the one exception, that's kale. The kale, you can actually take the big, long stalks after it gets tall and ugly, cut them in pieces and stick them in the ground like Hawaiian tea, and they will re-leaf and grow more kale. I haven't planted kale seed for about 3-4 years around here. All my kale was old stuff, been replanted from canes, and I get leaves off it every day. All right, so, there's a good one. Now, when it comes into things like fruit trees, there is a misconception, it's popular too, and that is that just because Hawaii is a tropical environment, that a given tree, like let's say it's an avocado or a rambutan, okay, there's a misconception that the rambutan bears fruit all the time. It's not true. They're highly seasonal, and avocados too, highly seasonal. Now, in the case of rambutans, most of varieties that I know of tend to fruit kind of about the same time of year. So with the avocados, we have multiple varieties. And the different varieties do bear at different times of the year. And so if you do your planting right, you can get avocados most of the time here. But you got to use several different trees in order to do that. But there's one that it's possible, if planned right, you can eat guacamole almost every day here. A lot of citrus is that way, especially the sour varieties. Limes and lemons, they bear in 2 cycles a year here, and those cycles often overlap, so there's almost always something in the trees. When it comes to oranges, most varieties tend to ripen and fall, but the Valencia does hold in the tree, overlapping into the next crop. So with Valencia oranges, it's possible that you can have an orange for breakfast every day. Yes, it could be done. Now, bananas are like that. It's one reason that they're so important and popular in the tropical environment. A banana can have fruit on it anytime. Just depends really on when they were planted, what kind it is, and how they were fed. But I randomly get bananas popping out of my plants all around the calendar. So I can almost always find something. Papayas are the same way. It's again another reason we raise so many of them here. Papayas, you can usually find fruit almost any day. Yeah, bananas and papayas are my main go-to for sweet fruit here on the farm. I will always start looking there. I usually move on from there into citrus because I have different varieties of citrus, and they do come at different times of the year. They're not quite as spread as avocados, but they do come at different times. And so I can get citrus like that. The Mysore raspberry, despite it being a thorny and nasty thing, is the most incredible yield of berries that will go on almost 12 months. And you can almost always find some Mysore in your berry vine, depending on how you pruned it. Pruning will be the only thing that'll control whether your Mysore is fruiting or not. If you have just cut it back, like I do once a year, to about a 2-foot plant, then for a couple of months it's going to quit. This has to regrow itself in order to fruit again. But but there's another one. Now, some things are not year-round. They're highly seasonal, but they, like the pineapple, for instance. If you have a few varieties, there is some spread. Okay, as far as when that ripens, different types tend to ripen a little bit different times, although most all of our pineapples here usually come on somewhere in late summer to early fall, no matter what variety it is. I have none that come on in the winter usually. A couple of rare random fruits will pop up at any old time, but they're not reliable. I don't know why or how it happens. But the pineapple is a good one, though, because it's extremely reliable here. It's quite easy to grow pineapples under most of the conditions we have on the island, whether it's lava or it's soil, whether it's relatively dry to fairly wet, they grow. The jabuticaba, I don't find it to be the most useful fruit, per se. If I made jams and jellies, or maybe if I was a winemaker, I'd probably find the fruit more useful for me. But I don't do jams, jellies. I don't drink wine much, so mostly I eat my jaboticaba just fresh out of hand. On occasion, I have juiced them out and frozen them as popsicles. That's good, too. It's a lot of work, though. You got to get the pits out, But anyway, I have done that with it. But in general, the jaboticaba for me is mostly an out-of-the-hand fruit. Just pop it in, like junk food. But they do bear throughout almost the entire year. Yeah, it's on and off. They don't have fruit on them every day, but a given tree will have multiple fruitings throughout the course of a year, and I haven't even necessarily figured out whether there's any kind of schedule, rhyme, or reason to it. They just seem to go in the fruit, although they all seem to do it at about the same time. I have 6 trees. Some dragon fruit is pretty good for you in that regard because you'll get 2 crops a year of some of the varieties. Most of the types that have been crossed to the yellow, the Solenocerius megalanthus. So like Frankie's Red. Okay, there's one. Chances are S8 might have been bred that way. I'm not positive what its parents are, but both of those will produce 2 crops a year. And they don't overlap. The vines are empty between fruitings, but they do produce more than 1 crop a year. And the yellow is even better at that. The yellow produces 2 pretty good-sized crops almost every year. And so we get that fruit frequently. It's a reliable fruit. Another one that'll crop about 3 times a year, and that's if you're using a day-neutral, ever-bearing strawberry. TriStar is one that I have here. And whereas strawberries are a real pain with things like birds, bugs, slugs, my suggestion is for strawberries, either you use complete exclusion or maybe hanging baskets on the sunny eaves of your house. TriStar will bear fruit on dangling plants on the runners, like a spider plant. Yeah, there's one. There are others, but just to kind of pass along some ideas here, at least for us on this spot, because we have deep soil. Growing corn, sweet corn or hard corn, popcorn, pretty much any month of the year. I can do corn 12 months, year round. I limit myself with it only because it's fattening. I like it, and I eat too much of it when I grow it. So I try to grow a crop, stop, wait, grow a crop, maybe 2 or 3 a year is about all I allow myself over here. But yeah, that's a pretty good one. If you have soil, if you're on lava, you'd have to make artificial soil, and of course you'd need so much of it. The corn needs a lot of space and a lot of numbers. And so that's an easier crop for the rest of you in the island who happen to have enough soil that you can, till, stir. Anyway, this should give you an idea. I'm just trying to get these general thoughts across that just because it's tropical doesn't mean that things go year-round. They don't. Just because it's tropical doesn't mean that everything grows here. It doesn't. But there are things that do thrive year-round and things that grow extremely well here. Those are the ones that you're going to be surviving on. Yep. My diet has changed to some extent, and where I resist changing my diet because of my old habits, well, that's when I end up in the store. Yeah, I got to go buy them potatoes from California. I got my rice from California. Everybody here eats rice. It's the most popular grain on the island, and we don't grow any of it. It all comes in. Anyway, hang loose, folks. Aloha. Y'all have a good day.